To reiterate, this text and this section of text which was narrated yesterday does not state that the racial origin of untouchability also applies as the racial origin of caste. This is a separate issue and therefore cannot be conflated. At the same time, racial origin or an occupational origin are both in this regard the same. They do not What is not being talked about is the racial or occupational origin of caste. However, what is being talked about is the racial and occupational origin of untouchability. Caste in itself nowadays presently has two different modes of thought. One school of thought, which is primarily put forward by Kanchara Shepherd, states that it is racial in origin and that the Shudras and other lower castes in general are mostly Dravidian, as stated before. The Dravidians themselves had developed a system of division in occupation. However, this system, just like Gotra or Kul, was horizontal. It was not vertical. It was not graded inequality, nor was it inequality at all. In fact, it was just a pure division of occupation based on inheritance or based on family. This did not translate into caste. Other tribes which existed in India did not possess this sort of system. They did not possess a graded inequality, nor did they, at this point, had developed a system of separation in occupation. When the Aryans came to India, they saw this system adopted by the Dravidians and adopted it for themselves as caste, as graded inequality, where Dravidians were put at the end and broken Aryan men. Thus, broken subcastes or tribes or groups or families within the Aryans themselves were put as the lowest, along with the Dravidians. And one section of Dravidians were given more rights than the others in order to keep everyone happy. At the same time, Kul Gotra systems are so called primitive in origin, and thus every tribe possesses them. Thus, the Aryans possessed them and the Dravidians possessed them as well. And thus, in this creation of caste, these got aligned together and a common system of Kul and Gotra may have emerged, thus we see that Kul and Gotra are common across castes instead of within a caste. And therefore, families which were previously divided may have been divided again based on caste rather than Kul and Gotra in itself. Furthermore, it is also to be noted that untouchability is present amongst the avarnas, and that is people who are below the Chaturvarna. Untouchability is not present within the Shudras, who are the lowest caste of the Chaturvarna itself. And what has not been known and is not known is whether the avarnas came up with untouchability or whether they were separate and were incorporated into Hinduism with untouchability in mind later on. This is not known yet, and what is propounded by Ambedkar himself is that these people existed as broken men from before, thus pointing towards them being Dravidian or broken men of the Aryan race itself, and were treated as untouchables after the practice of beef eating came about. This will be discussed later on in this book and will come up in later sections. Thus, what can be seen is that Kul and Gotra systems of tribal or primitive organization are common within all castes, since these may have been amalgamated when the Aryans and the Dravidians contacted it themselves. What is also known is that the Dravidians did possess an occupational division in their society which may have been adopted by the Aryans as graded inequality. And what is also known or is suspected is that the majority of people who are lower caste are Dravidian. And what is also known is that the untouchables, though not Dravidian, though not majority Dravidian, are still considered to be broken men of both Dravidian and Aryan descent. Thus, what can be seen is that the lower castes within the Chaturvarna are most probably Dravidian, and that the lowest castes or Avarna outside of the Chaturvarna are comprised of both Dravidians and broken men of the Aryans. Therefore, Aryans are always placed at the top, and a majority of the highest castes are Aryan, whereas a majority of the lower castes, including those outside of the Chaturvarna, are either Dravidian or a broken man of the Aryan tradition. And Adivasis and other tribes, other races which are found in India are all considered untouchable, are all considered outside of the Chaturvarna. The end.